So here's what's going on. McDonald's, the Golden Arches, the place that practically defined childhood for an entire generation, is watching its sales numbers slide downward. They've poured money into sleek renovations, installed those fancy McCafe espresso stations, redesigned their interiors to look more like an airport lounge than a burger joint. And yet, new customers just aren't walking through those doors the way they used to. Something fundamental has shifted, and it's not just happening at McDonald's. What we're witnessing right now is a phenomenon that stretches across the entire dining industry. 17 massive household name restaurant chains, brands you've known your whole life, brands your parents took you to as a kid, are all unraveling at the same time. And I don't mean they had one rough quarter. I mean they're experiencing the kind of structural breakdown this industry has literally never seen before at this scale. Now here's the thing that makes this so fascinating and a little bit eerie. This isn't being driven by some viral scandal or a single economic downturn you can point to on a graph. The real story goes much deeper than that. It comes down to a series of deliberate decisions these companies made about how they treat the people who eat their food. Prices crept higher and higher. The amount of food on your plate got noticeably smaller. The quality that used to make these places worth visiting took a nosedive. And that's just the stuff you can observe from your seat in the restaurant. Behind the scenes, things got even messier. The dedicated, loyal customers who had been keeping these brands profitable for decades. The families who came in every Friday night. The office workers who grabbed lunch there 3 times a week. The couples who celebrated anniversaries at the same booth year after year. Those people finally reached their breaking point. They looked at the bill, looked at the food, looked at each other, and just stopped coming back. And the consequences have been staggering. One of these chains is currently sitting under more than $1 billion in accumulated debt. Another one burned through hundreds of millions of dollars on a splashy rebranding campaign that fell apart within a single week. And one massive coffee empire just reported a year so disastrous that financial analysts didn't even try to sugarcoat it. They flat out called it a total loss. Before we jump into the list, I want you to do something real quick. Think about these 17 chains as we go through them, and keep a mental count of how many you've personally stopped visiting in the last year or two. I'm willing to bet the number is higher than you'd expect. And that's not random. There's a very clear, very specific pattern driving all of this. It starts with the very first brand on our list today. Let's get into it. 1. Starbucks. When your morning ritual becomes a monthly bill, all right, let's kick things off with the Green Mermaid herself. Starbucks was never really just about the coffee, was it? Think about what it actually represented in your daily routine. It was that mobile order you tapped out while you were still half asleep, shuffling around your apartment in socks. It was the grab-and-go pickup that meant you didn't have to make awkward elevator small talk with a coworker before your brain had even swithed on. It was that cozy third space, not your house, not your office, where you could park yourself in a corner chair with your laptop and just decompress for 20 minutes without anyone bothering you. That daily ritual genuinely mattered to millions of people. It was woven into the fabric of their mornings. But here's what happened. Somewhere around 2024 and into 2025, a whole lot of Americans started doing something they'd been avoiding for years. They actually sat down and calculated what that ritual was costing them. A plain latte? $6. Want cold foam on top? That bumps it to $7. Throw in oat milk and an extra espresso shot? Now you're staring at $8 for a single drink. And when you multiply that out, because math is undefeated, that casual coffee habit adds up to roughly $40 every single week. That's around $160 a month, close to $2,000 a year, all to avoid spending 5 minutes with a coffee maker in your own kitchen. And here's what's interesting about how people responded. Nobody made a dramatic announcement. There were no boycotts, no angry protests outside Starbucks locations. People just started showing up less often. It was gradual, almost invisible at first. The morning lines that used to snake out the door and down the sidewalk in major cities got a little shorter. Then a little shorter. Then you started noticing empty tables inside locations that used to have people camped out from open to close. And suddenly, Starbucks, a company operating roughly 16,000 stores across the United States alone, pulling in tens of billions in annual revenue, started looking genuinely vulnerable in a way nobody expected. The foundation that seemed rock solid was showing hairline cracks, and those cracks were getting wider by the quarter. That's when the company made its big move. They brought in Brian Niccol, the executive who had been widely praised for engineering Chipotle's impressive turnaround. Starbucks didn't just hire him, They lured him with an absolutely enormous compensation package in late 2024. The kind of deal that tells you how urgent the situation really was. And credit where it's due, Nickel came in swinging. He rolled out a billion-dollar restructuring initiative. Roughly 900 corporate positions were eliminated. He made public commitments about restoring the original Starbucks cafe experience, bringing back real ceramic mugs, investing in comfortable seating, creating an atmosphere that felt warm and inviting again instead of like a sterile pickup counter for mobile orders. On paper, it sounded perfect. It sounded like exactly what every frustrated Starbucks customer had been begging for. The problem is that the numbers told a completely different story. When financial analysts dug into the early performance data from 2025, they found weaker foot traffic than projected, profit margins under pressure, and revenue growth that was modest at best. Wall Street started calling it a reset year, which if you're not fluent in corporate speak, basically translates to this isn't working yet, and we're not sure when it will. By the tail end of 2025, Starbucks stock had dropped roughly 7% from where it was sitting when Nickel first stepped into the role. Investors were clearly skeptical about the turnaround story, and honestly, it's hard to blame them. Here's the uncomfortable reality that nobody at Starbucks headquarters wants to say out loud. You can slash 900 jobs and spend $1 billion making the stores prettier, but none of that fixes the central problem. You priced your most loyal, most habitual customers completely out of their daily routine. You turned an automatic, mindless habit into an active financial decision that people have to justify every single morning. And on most mornings, the justification just doesn't hold up. And it's worth pausing on that stock decline for a second, because a 7% drop might not sound dramatic on its own, but for a company of Starbucks' size and global reputation, it represents billions of dollars in lost market value. Investors aren't just reacting to the current quarter, they're pricing in their confidence about the future. And when the stock slides during what's supposed to be a recovery period led by a celebrated turnaround executive, it tells you that the people with the most money on the line aren't buying the comeback narrative. They're worried the damage might already be structural and potentially permanent. Oh, and while we're being real, let's talk about what's actually in those cups. Those beloved blended drinks and flavored lattes that people used to order on autopilot? Many of them pack 400 to 600 calories per serving. The sugar content in some of those drinks rivals what you'd find in a glazed donut. What felt like grabbing a coffee was really more like drinking dessert through a straw. And as more people started paying attention to nutrition labels and what they're actually putting into their bodies, that realization didn't exactly help Starbucks' case. Starbucks isn't going to vanish off the face of the earth, let's be clear about that. But it's no longer the automatic, default, unquestioned choice it used to be. It's become something you have to actively decide is worth it. And most mornings, for most people, it just isn't anymore. If you're already nodding along because you've cut back on your own Starbucks visits, smash that like button and let me know in the comments how much you think you've saved this year. Seriously, I want to hear those numbers. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this list. It gets way more intense from here. 2. Chipotle. The fast casual darling that priced itself into a corner. Chipotle was supposed to be different. That was the whole pitch from day one. This was the restaurant that was going to prove that fast food didn't have to mean cheap ingredients, tiny portions, and that vague feeling of regret you get 30 minutes after eating. Real ingredients prepared fresh, no industrial freezers in the back, generous helpings, and a dining experience that felt responsible without being pretentious. It positioned itself as the intelligent alternative, the place where you could eat quickly and still walk out feeling good about the choice you just made. And for the better part of a decade, that message absolutely resonated. The growth trajectory was incredible. Office workers packed the stores during lunch rushes like clockwork. College students made it a weekly ritual. Thursday night Chipotle runs became as much a part of campus culture as cramming for exams. Families started picking it up for easy weeknight dinners, without the usual guilt that comes with choosing fast food. The company was posting double-digit growth year after year, quarter after quarter, as if it had discovered some secret formula that every other restaurant chain was too clueless to figure out. Then 2025 hit, and the momentum didn't just slow down, it stalled. Same-store sales growth went flat. During earnings calls with investors, company executives had to stand up and openly acknowledge what everybody could already see happening. Lower-income customers were pulling back. And the reason was painfully simple. A standard burrito meal was now ringing up at $12 to $15, And that's before you add a drink or chips. Social media turned into a courtroom almost overnight. People started posting side-by-side comparison photos showing what a Chipotle bowl looked like in 2019 versus what it looked like in 2025. Visibly smaller portions at significantly higher prices, with extra charges stacking up for add-ons like guacamole that felt like they should just be included at that price point. The comment sections under those posts were absolutely brutal. Former regulars weren't just mildly annoyed, they were genuinely frustrated. People wrote things like, "I used to eat here twice a week without thinking about it. Now it's maybe twice a month, and even that feels expensive." Others were even more direct. Chipotle is charging boutique salad bar prices for food that gets assembled in 30 seconds on a conveyor line. How does that make any sense? And that gets at the real problem. Chipotle was trying desperately to maintain a premium brand image, but premium only works when the experience genuinely earns it. Standing in a long, slow-moving line, watching someone behind the counter carefully ration out your rice scoop by scoop, mentally calculating whether you can afford to add guacamole without feeling like you just made a bad financial decision. None of that feels elevated or special. It just feels like overpriced fast food with better marketing. The company eventually had to confront a truth it had been dodging for a while. The affordable, healthier burrito that built the brand's entire identity had quietly transformed into a luxury purchase. And when your foundational promise to customers is accessibility, good food doesn't have to cost a fortune, that kind of drift is genuinely dangerous to the business. And since we're being honest with each other here, let's talk about that healthy bowl you've been customizing. Once you add the rice, the beans, the cheese, the sour cream, and the guac, a fully loaded Chipotle bowl can cruise past 1,000 calories without breaking a sweat. The sodium content in some configurations is higher than what you'd find in 3 full bags of potato chips. The health halo that Chipotle wrapped around itself was always shinier and more convincing than the actual nutrition facts on the back of the wrapper ever supported. It's a classic case of marketing outrunning reality, and when customers finally caught up and started reading the fine print, the disillusionment hit hard. There's also the consistency problem that longtime customers started noticing. The experience at one Chipotle could feel genuinely generous, with employees who piled on the ingredients and made the bowl feel like a real value. But the location down the street might feel stingy, with carefully portioned scoops that left you staring at a half-empty bowl, wondering where your $14 went. That inconsistency became a source of genuine frustration, and social media amplified it. People started filming their orders being made, comparing portion sizes across locations, and the optics were devastating for a brand that was already under price pressure. 3. Sweetgreen. When eating clean costs more than your grocery, Sweetgreen was built for a very particular cultural moment. And for a while, it fit that moment like a glove. It catered to young urban professionals who wanted their lunch to double as a lifestyle statement. Seasonal produce, minimalist presentations, sustainability talking points baked into every aspect of the brand, and Instagram-worthy bowls that basically said, "Look at me, I've got my life together." For a stretch, paying a premium for ethically sourced, beautifully plated greens felt completely justified. It was an investment in yourself, right? By 2025, that narrative had crumbled. In a single quarter, same-store sales cratered by nearly 10%. The stock price went into freefall. Investors bailed out quickly and aggressively because the math suddenly became impossible to ignore. A business model built around $18 salads doesn't survive when its target demographic is struggling to balance lunch against rent, student loan payments, and rising grocery bills. People started posting their Sweetgreen receipts online, and the reaction was visceral. $17, $19, $22 for a bowl containing some mixed greens, a modest portion of grilled chicken, a few roasted vegetables, and a drizzle of dressing that barely covered the bottom. The internet didn't hold back. Comments poured in like, "That's 3 days of home-cooked lunches sitting in one cardboard bowl. And this is literally why my savings account is empty." Sweetgreen's entire brand identity was anchored to one core belief: this is worth it. Cleaner ingredients. More responsible sourcing. A fundamentally better choice. But when making that better choice means skipping other meals or dipping into your grocery budget just to afford a single lunch, the entire value equation falls apart. The logic stops working. And here's the part that almost never gets discussed. For someone like a working parent in their late 40s, someone juggling a family budget while trying to feed their kids healthier food, Sweetgreen was never really designed for them in the first place. The brand was aimed at a younger, higher-income, single-person demographic. Feeding a family of 4 at Sweetgreen prices would require a second mortgage. From a nutritional standpoint, the bowls can absolutely be solid, but the financial reality is hard to argue with. 5 home-prepared lunches using fresh ingredients from the grocery store cost roughly the same as one single Sweetgreen bowl. When healthy eating becomes financially exclusive, it stops serving the people who actually need access to it the most. Sweetgreen didn't just lose customers, it lost the entire foundation of the story it had been telling. The idea that it was the smart, responsible choice. Once that belief cracked, everything built on top of it started to fall. Quick check-in. Are you keeping count of how many of these chains you've personally stopped visiting? If the number is already climbing, you're definitely not alone. Drop a like on this video and tell me in the comments which one hit closest to home for you. And make sure you're subscribed, because we're just getting warmed up. 4. Hooters. A concept that ran out of cultural runway. Let's just be straightforward about this one. Hooters was always treated more like a cultural artifact than a serious restaurant. Wings, cheap pitchers of beer, sports playing on every screen, and a business model that was built entirely around a concept most people tolerated through the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, largely because cultural standards were, let's say, less refined back then. For a while, it got a pass as harmless fun. Nobody thought about it too hard. But at some point, the jokes stopped being funny. Younger generations, millennials and Gen Z especially, have essentially zero interest in bringing their friends to a place where the entire dining concept revolves around objectifying the people who work there. It doesn't come across as edgy or rebellious anymore. It just feels awkward, outdated, and deeply uncomfortable in a way that's hard to explain to someone who hasn't felt it. Throughout 2024 and into 2025, Hooters started quietly closing down dozens of locations across the country. The official corporate explanation pointed to challenging economic conditions, which is the standard press release language companies use when they don't want to admit the real problem. And the real problem is devastatingly simple. The brand didn't age well. Not even a little bit. Its entire identity is rooted in an era that most of society has moved past, and it shows in every empty parking lot and half-filled dining room. Gen Z would genuinely rather eat at almost any other establishment on the planet. And even the older demographic, the Boomer and Gen X customers who used to swing by for Monday Night Football wings and a few beers, have largely drifted away from it too. Some of them are paying more attention to their health these days. Others just feel weird about walking into a Hooters with their teenage son or daughter. There's an uncomfortable quality to it now that simply didn't exist 20 years ago. Hooters isn't reinventing itself. It isn't finding a clever new angle or a fresh identity. It's just gradually evaporating. One deserted dining room and one darkened sign at a time, and nobody seems particularly upset about it. In fact, the most telling sign of how far Hooters has fallen isn't the store closures themselves. It's the complete absence of public outcry about those closures. When a beloved brand closes locations, you see passionate online communities mourning the loss, petition campaigns, social media tributes. With Hooters, the response has been closer to a collective shrug. And that indifference is arguably more damning than any vocal criticism would be. When people don't even care enough to be upset that you're disappearing, you know the brand has lost whatever cultural relevance it once had. The wings, ironically, were never even that good compared to dedicated wing joints that have proliferated across the country. Wingstop, Buffalo Wild Wings, and countless local wing spots offer better quality, more flavor variety, and an atmosphere where everybody at the table can feel comfortable. Hooters food was never the actual draw, and once the non-food draw lost its appeal, there was genuinely nothing left to keep people coming back. 5. TGI Fridays. The party ended, and nobody noticed TGI Fridays used to represent something very specific and very recognizable in American dining culture. Towering plates of loaded potato skins, Jack Daniel's glaze smothered on everything, from chicken to ribs to appetizers. After-work happy hours, where coworkers would crowd around high-top tables and decompress from the week. Birthday dinners, where the entire waitstaff would materialize at your table, clap enthusiastically, sing a slightly off-key birthday song, and make the whole thing feel like a genuine production. It was loud, it was cheesy, it was completely over the top, and somehow, that was exactly the charm. It felt like guaranteed fun. By 2024, that energy had completely evaporated. Fridays didn't feel like a celebration anymore. It felt exhausted. Then came the decisive blow. Approximately 50 United States locations were shuttered in a single corporate restructuring move. What had been lively Friday night gathering spots became dark, silent buildings practically overnight. Lights off, signs down, parking lots empty. The casual dining segment has been caught in a kind of existential limbo for years now. And Fridays is maybe the most vivid illustration of the problem. Modern families tend to make one of two clear choices when they're deciding where to eat. Either they go cheap and fast, grabbing quick service meals that are easy on the wallet, or they go local and special, choosing independently owned restaurants that feel like a genuine experience worth the splurge. Fridays is trapped in the awkward no man's land between those two options. It costs too much to feel like a deal, but it's too generic to feel memorable or worth the money. The atmosphere hasn't been meaningfully updated since roughly 2007. The decor looks frozen in time like a restaurant-themed time capsule. The menu attempts to cover every single craving imaginable: burgers, ribs, pasta, salads, appetizers, desserts, and as a result, doesn't do any of them particularly well. And those famous loaded appetizer platters? Some of them contain more sodium in a single serving than the recommended daily intake for an entire adult. TGI Fridays once felt like a built-in event, a place where simply walking through the door meant the evening was going to be fun. Now it feels more like a brand wandering through its own history, trying to remember what made people love it in the first place and coming up empty. 6. Applebee's. The default that stopped being good enough Applebee's used to be absolutely everywhere. Strip malls, highway exits, smack in the middle of small-town main streets. It occupied this very specific and very useful lane in American dining. It was the place you chose when you didn't feel like cooking, but also didn't want to spend 15 minutes going back and forth about where to eat. Nobody was excited about Applebee's, but nobody needed to be. It was reliable. It was there. It existed. And for a long time in American suburban life, simply existing was enough to keep the doors open and the tables full. That's no longer the case. In 2024, company leadership closed roughly 30 locations and publicly warned investors that additional closures were almost certainly coming. That announcement wasn't really about 30 individual restaurants failing. It was a signal of something much deeper. Entire communities had quietly moved on. The automatic default family dinner spot just wasn't Applebee's anymore. It happened so gradually that nobody even noticed until the parking lots started looking sparse on Saturday nights. The reasons aren't complicated or mysterious. Nothing about the Applebee's experience feels distinctive or memorable. The menu reads like it was assembled by committee, a little bit of everything, done to a middling level of quality. The decor is aggressively neutral. The overall experience is fine, just fine. And fine doesn't motivate anyone to get off the couch when there's a Netflix queue loaded up and DoorDash is literally 2 taps away on their phone. Younger diners are looking for places with personality, local character, interesting menus, something worth taking a photo of or telling friends about. Older customers, meanwhile, are paying more attention to what they eat, cutting back on fried foods, watching their sodium intake, being more deliberate about ingredients, and the Applebee's menu doesn't really meet them where they are on any of those fronts. Applebee's isn't imploding in some spectacular headline-grabbing fashion. There's no scandal, no dramatic collapse. It's fading, slowly and quietly losing relevance: one closed location, one skipped family dinner, and one forgotten coupon mailer at a time. The neighborhood grill lost its neighbors, and honestly, nobody seems particularly motivated to find their way back. All right, quick pause. How many of these first 6 chains have you personally stopped visiting over the last couple of years? Be real with yourself. Starbucks? Chipotle? Sweetgreen? Hooters? TGI Fridays? Applebee's? If you're counting 3 or more, you're not some outlier or anomaly. You're literally the majority. You represent what's happening across the entire country right now. If that resonates, hit the like button, drop your count in the comments, and make sure you're subscribed, because the next section gets significantly more intense. We're talking about the brands everyone assumed were untouchable. 7. Red Robin. Stuck in the middle with nowhere to go, Red Robin used to occupy a very particular and very comfortable spot in the American family dining landscape. It was the birthday dinner destination, not McDonald's, which felt too cheap and rushed for a celebration, and not a proper steakhouse, which felt like too much of a financial commitment for a Tuesday night. Red Robin sat right in that Goldilocks zone. Big, juicy gourmet burgers, bottomless steak fries that just kept coming, a towering brownie sundae for dessert, and that endearingly awkward birthday clap from the staff while your kids sat there beaming like it was the greatest night of their entire young life. For a long time, that formula was bulletproof. By 2025, though, Red Robin found itself stuck in what industry analysts politely refer to as turnaround mode, and what everybody outside of Wall Street recognizes as a slow, grinding, dispiriting decline. After years of location remodels, menu refreshes, marketing pivots, and strategy overhauls, customers still aren't coming back in the numbers the company needs. Foot traffic continues to underwhelm. Same-store sales keep missing projections quarter after quarter. The fundamental issue is an identity crisis. Red Robin isn't cheap enough to compete with Five Guys, which offers a comparable burger experience at a lower price point with zero pretense. It doesn't have the cultural buzz or the modern aesthetic of places like Shake Shack, which feels current and Instagram-worthy. And it's nowhere near fast enough to compete with actual fast food chains for the convenience crowd. Red Robin occupies the most dangerous position in the restaurant business, the exact middle. Average price, average speed, average experience. An average doesn't get families to put shoes on and drive to a restaurant anymore. Modern parents make much sharper, more deliberate trade-offs when it comes to dining out. They'll either go cheaper and save the money, or they'll spend a little more on something that genuinely feels like a special experience. Red Robin doesn't convincingly win either of those choices. It's too expensive to feel thrifty and too ordinary to feel like a treat. And here's something that matters, even if it's slightly uncomfortable to acknowledge. Those massive burgers paired with unlimited fries create a heavy, sluggish, post-meal feeling that a lot of adults in their 40s and 50s have grown tired of. That food coma that used to be part of the fun? For parents who are trying to keep up with energetic kids, manage their own weight, or just feel functional after dinner, that heaviness has become a genuine negative. The once fun family outing now comes with hours of regret, and that's a tough association for any restaurant to shake. Red Robin has been talking about a comeback for years. But here's the brutal truth about the restaurant business. Once customers have mentally replaced you on their short list of where to eat, no amount of fresh paint, new menu items, or renovated signage is enough to win them back. The slot in their brain that used to say Red Robin now says something else, and reversing that is nearly impossible. 8. Noodles & Company. A good idea that couldn't afford itself. Noodles & Company set out to be the refreshing alternative for people who were exhausted by the endless parade of burger joints. The pitch was all about variety and comfort. Pasta dishes in multiple styles, Asian-inspired noodle bowls, creamy mac and cheese with different twists, classic comfort food wrapped in a fast casual format that felt just different enough from everything else to be interesting. Conceptually, it was smart. It identified a real gap in the market and went after it. The problem is what happens when your entire menu is built around big bowls of carbohydrates, and the business math behind those bowls is absolutely punishing. The raw ingredient, pasta, is remarkably cheap, but preparing it at scale, cooking each dish to order, customizing toppings and sauces, plating it attractively, and serving it with fast casual speed adds layers of real cost. You can't realistically charge $15 for a plate of spaghetti without customers raising an eyebrow. But at $9, the profit margins are razor thin to the point of barely existing. There simply isn't a comfortable price point that keeps both customers and the business happy at the same time. That financial squeeze started showing up in physical ways. In 2024, the company shuttered approximately 20 locations. Shortly after, another 15 to 20 closures were announced. That's nearly 40 restaurants eliminated. Not because of any controversy or bad press, but because entire regions of the country simply stopped generating enough revenue to cover the costs of keeping the lights on. Rising labor expenses and climbing ingredient costs collided head-on with low average ticket prices. And there was no obvious escape route from the pressure. Customers also had plenty of alternatives pulling their attention. Local Italian and Asian restaurants often offered better value, better quality, or both. And a growing number of people realized they could make pasta at home for a tiny fraction of the cost with minimal effort. It's literally one of the easiest meals to prepare from scratch. For families who were becoming more health conscious and paying closer attention to blood sugar levels and refined carbohydrate intake, oversized bowls of pasta drenched in cream sauce weren't exactly making a compelling nutritional argument either. Noodles & Company tried to carve out a unique and defensible lane in the fast casual world. The concept itself wasn't the problem. The problem was that the niche it identified simply couldn't generate enough revenue to cover the rent, the labor, and the ingredients. And once that equation breaks, no amount of menu innovation can fix it. We're deep into this list now, and I appreciate you sticking with me. If you're finding this valuable and you know someone, a friend, a family member, a coworker, who would find this interesting too, share this video with them. And if you haven't liked and subscribed yet, now's the time. We've got some absolutely wild stories coming up in the back half of this list. Mod Pizza. When customization costs more than convenience, Mod Pizza felt like a genuine glimpse into the future of dining, at least for a little while. Personal-sized pizzas, unlimited toppings at no extra charge, quick, efficient service, total control over every aspect of your meal. The whole experience felt fresh, modern, interactive, and just different enough from traditional pizza ordering to generate real excitement. People loved the concept. You could walk in, build exactly the pizza you wanted, and have it in your hands within minutes. It felt revolutionary in the pizza space. Fast forward to 2025, and the tone around Mod has shifted dramatically. The brand started appearing in industry reports and analyst coverage for an entirely different reason: store closures and corporate efforts to trim underperforming locations from the portfolio. The fast casual pizza craze that seemed unstoppable just a few years ago has noticeably cooled off, and the structural weaknesses in the business model have become impossible to paper over. The challenges compound on each other rapidly. Commercial rents remain stubbornly high. Ingredient costs, cheese, meats, produce haven't come down. Labor costs continue their steady climb upward. And meanwhile, the major delivery-focused pizza chains are putting large pizzas in front of customers for half the price of Mod's single personal-sized pie. When that price comparison registers in a customer's mind, and it always does eventually, the novelty of unlimited toppings starts to lose its magic pretty quickly. The deeper lesson here goes beyond just Mod Pizza. Customization sounds like a business strategy, but it's really just a feature, and features alone don't sustain a business when the underlying economics don't work. When that feature costs twice as much as a coupon-powered large pizza from Domino's or Pizza Hut, the vast majority of customers stop caring about how many toppings they can pile onto their personal pie. There's also the health dimension that deserves a mention. Individual pizzas loaded up with processed meats, heavy layers of cheese, and rich sauces still add up to a meal packed with inflammatory ingredients, high sodium, and significant calories. For the growing segment of diners who are actively making healthier choices, that reality diminishes the appeal even further. The fast casual pizza gold rush had its shining moment. Everybody rushed in, everybody found something shiny to hold up. But now the easy gold is gone, and what's left in the pan isn't nearly as valuable as everyone thought it was going to be. 10. Outback Steakhouse. The special night out that got too expensive, Outback Steakhouse, occupied a beloved lane in suburban American dining for years. It was the go-to destination for those occasions that called for something a little nicer than the usual routine, but didn't require dressing up or making a reservation 3 weeks in advance. Anniversaries, birthdays, promotions, end-of-season celebrations. Outback was the place you went when you wanted to treat yourself without going completely overboard on the bill. And of course, anchoring the entire experience was the bloomin' onion, because apparently nothing communicates tonight is special quite like a deep-fried vegetable, roughly the diameter of a basketball. That version of Outback, approachable, fun, and financially justifiable, started unraveling in early 2024. Parent company Bloomin' Brands announced the closure of 41 underperforming restaurant locations in a single corporate action, and a significant portion of those were Outback Steakhouses. One press release. 41 dining rooms shuttered. Years of family steak night traditions erased practically overnight, caught in the squeeze between soaring beef prices, escalating labor costs, and a customer base that was simply showing up less and less frequently. The underlying math tells the whole story. A typical Outback dinner, a steak, the bloomin' onion to share, a couple of sides, maybe a drink, can easily land in the $40 to $50 range per person. For a family of 4, that's $150 to $200 before you've even calculated the tip. That's not a casual weeknight dinner anymore. That's a once-a-year splurge, and even then, a lot of families think twice about it now. Then there's the health angle, which has become increasingly relevant. For parents and adults who are paying closer attention to cholesterol numbers, calorie intake, and cardiovascular health, the bloomin' onion alone clocks in at nearly 2,000 calories and is loaded with saturated fat. Add a ribeye steak and fully loaded sides on top of that, and your celebratory dinner starts looking less like a treat and more like a preview of an uncomfortable conversation at your next doctor's appointment. When nostalgia starts demanding both a significant financial sacrifice and potential physical consequences, most families quietly opt out. And that's precisely what has happened. Outback isn't vanishing completely, not yet, but the version of it that felt approachable, fun, and easy to justify is effectively gone. 11. Panera Bread. The healthy option that wasn't let me throw in a chain that deserves to be part of this conversation, even though it might not be on everyone's radar for the same reasons. Panera Bread built its entire brand around the promise of being the cleaner, healthier, more transparent choice in fast casual dining. The food as it should be messaging. The commitment to removing artificial preservatives and additives. The menu that featured soups, salads, and sandwiches that felt wholesome and responsible, compared to the deep-fried alternatives at other chains. But here's what quietly happened. Panera's prices kept climbing until a simple soup and sandwich combo could run you $13 to $16 before you even added a drink. The portions, meanwhile, didn't keep pace with those price increases. And when consumers started actually scrutinizing the nutritional information, really reading those labels instead of just trusting the branding, they discovered that many of Panera's menu items were carrying far more sodium, sugar, and calories than the clean eating image suggested. Some of those seemingly innocent soups packed a full day's worth of sodium into a single bowl. The subscription coffee program generated headlines and initially drove foot traffic, but it also created operational headaches and didn't translate into the sustained revenue boost the company needed. Locations started to feel tired. The bakery items, once a genuine differentiator, began to feel mass-produced, and competitors in the fast casual space started offering comparable or better quality at similar or lower price points. Panera isn't collapsing in the dramatic fashion of some other chains on this list, but it's experiencing a slow erosion of the trust and goodwill that took years to build. When your brand promise is we're the healthier choice, and consumers discover that's more marketing than reality, the disappointment cuts deeper than it would for a brand that never made that claim in the first place. Trust, once broken in the health and wellness space, is extraordinarily difficult to rebuild, because the customer doesn't just feel let down, they feel deceived. The locations themselves have started to reflect the brand's struggles. Wait times have increased at many stores. The bakery display cases that once felt abundant and freshly stocked sometimes look sparse and picked over, even during peak hours. The warm bakery cafe ambiance that originally set Panera apart from clinical fast food environments has faded in many locations, replaced by a transactional, get-in, get-out energy that strips away the very thing that made the brand feel special. For a chain that charged premium prices specifically because the experience was supposed to feel elevated, that atmospheric decline is a significant problem. All right, we're more than halfway through now. 11 chains down, and the pattern should be screaming at you by this point. None of these brands crumbled because of some massive scandal or a freak disaster. They all failed the exact same basic test. They stopped being worth it. The value equation broke, prices went up, quality went down, alternatives multiplied, and customers finally said enough. The next section? Things get significantly darker. We're talking about billion-dollar bankruptcies, a brand that imploded from over 1,000 locations to almost nothing. A logo redesign so catastrophically bad, it wiped nearly 10% off a company's stock value in a single week. And some stories that will genuinely shock you. Keep going. This is where it gets wild. 12. KFC, the original that forgot how to compete. This one genuinely baffles me, and I think it'll baffle you too when you really sit with it. Chicken is having an absolutely massive moment right now. It's arguably the hottest protein in the fast food industry. Chick-fil-A has drive-through lines that regularly wrap around entire buildings and spill into adjacent parking lots. Raising Cane's is expanding so aggressively that they're opening new locations faster than they can recruit and train management teams. Popeyes practically melted the internet when it launched a single chicken sandwich and created a cultural phenomenon. Chicken is booming. Demand is through the roof. Everyone wants it. And yet somehow KFC, the original fried chicken empire, the global brand with the Colonel's face recognized on literally every inhabited continent, is losing market share in the United States. During key quarters across 2024 and 2025, same-store sales dropped by roughly 5%. 5% decline at the exact moment when consumer demand for chicken was exploding across every other competitor in the category. So how does a legacy brand with decades of built-in recognition lose ground while the entire product category around it is thriving? By making things harder instead of simpler. By operating physical locations that feel frozen in a time warp while competitors feel fresh, clean, and modern. By offering a sprawling, confusing menu when the brand's eating their lunch, literally. Are succeeding by doing one thing exceptionally well and not complicating it. Look at the competition. Chick-fil-A sells chicken sandwiches and delivers a consistently pleasant, efficient customer experience. That's pretty much it. Raising Cane's focuses exclusively on chicken fingers with their signature dipping sauce. The menu is so streamlined you could memorize it in 30 seconds. Popeyes leans into bold, distinctive flavors and cultural relevance. Each of these competitors has a crystal clear identity. And KFC? KFC tries to do everything. Original recipe, extra crispy, grilled options, bowls, wraps, pot pies, sandwiches, family buckets, sides upon sides upon sides. And none of it is done with any particular distinction or excellence. The physical stores often feel like they haven't been renovated since 2005. The experience varies wildly depending on which location you visit. The overall quality feels inconsistent and unpredictable. Families who once made Sunday bucket runs a weekly tradition have quietly started going to just about any other chicken-focused establishment. And layered underneath all of that is a growing health awareness. A standard KFC meal, fried in industrial seed oils, coated in breading packed with a long list of additives and preservatives, doesn't sit the same way it used to with adults who are paying attention to what they feed themselves and their families. For people who grew up on those weekend KFC buckets, this isn't just about nostalgic fondness anymore. It's a dietary habit they're actively, consciously trying to break. KFC isn't disappearing from the global stage. International markets, particularly in Asia and Africa, remain strong and continue to grow. But in the United States, the company's home turf, the market where it was literally born, KFC is being systematically overtaken by faster, simpler, more focused competitors who remembered the fundamental lesson that KFC itself once mastered better than anyone. Do one thing, do it well, and don't overthink the rest. The brand that invented the category is now struggling to remain relevant within it, and there might not be a more damning indictment of how far the chain has drifted from what originally made it great. 13. Boston Market. From 1,100 stores to practically nothing, Boston Market once stood for something that genuinely mattered to busy families. It promised real home-style meals without requiring the effort of actually cooking them yourself. Rotisserie chicken that was actually good. Mashed potatoes that tasted like someone's grandmother made them. Vegetables that looked and tasted like real vegetables, not the frozen microwaved afterthoughts you got at other fast food places. It felt comforting and responsible, like you were still doing right by your family on those hectic weeknights when cooking from scratch just wasn't going to happen. By late 2024, that version of Boston Market had essentially ceased to exist. At its absolute peak, the chain operated more than 1,100 locations across the country. By the end, only a scattered handful remained, barely clinging to life. And the downfall wasn't a slow, dignified decline. It was chaotic, messy, and painfully public. Unpaid rent piling up across locations. Lawsuits from suppliers who hadn't been paid for delivered goods. Allegations of wage theft from employees who had worked faithfully for the company. State governments stepping in over unpaid taxes and outstanding bills. Landlords physically padlocking restaurant doors. Employees arriving at the beginning of their scheduled shifts only to discover the doors chained shut with no warning. No explanation, and no final paycheck. This wasn't a company quietly downsizing. It was a full-scale implosion. Boston Market collapsed under the weight of its own mismanagement, leaving behind a trail of angry creditors, unpaid workers, and abandoned storefronts scattered across cities and suburbs nationwide. So what went wrong at a fundamental level? The brand simply never evolved. There was no meaningful investment in digital ordering when every competitor was building apps and mobile platforms. There was no modern marketing strategy to reach new customers. There was no coherent answer to a world that was changing rapidly around it. And perhaps most fatally, grocery stores started selling their own rotisserie chickens, priced at $5 or $6, tasting just as good if not better, and available during any routine shopping trip. Once that happened, Boston Market lost the single thing it was built on, the convenience of a home-style meal without the hassle. When everyone else became faster, cheaper, and more convenient, Boston Market had absolutely nothing left to differentiate itself. And those wholesome meals? Many of them were carrying surprisingly high sodium counts and hidden calories tucked into the sides and sauces. Today, families can make a better version at home for less money, less nutritional compromise, and without the risk of driving to a location only to find the doors padlocked. Boston Market isn't in recovery. It's not limping along hoping for a turnaround. It's gone. If this one hit hard, because a lot of people have genuine childhood memories of Boston Market, let me know in the comments. What was your go-to order? And if you're finding this whole list eye-opening, this is the perfect time to smash that subscribe button. We've got some even crazier stories coming up, including a bankruptcy that involved more than $1 billion in debt. $1 billion. You don't want to miss it. 14. Red Lobster, $1 billion in debt, and an all-you-can-eat disaster. Red Lobster used to live in that sweet spot of dining out, fancy enough to feel like a genuine occasion, but not so upscale that you needed to dress up or stress about the bill. It was the birthday dinner spot, the anniversary destination, the celebratory go-to for families who wanted something a step above the usual. And of course, there were the Cheddar Bay biscuits, those impossibly addictive warm rolls that somehow convinced you the evening was going to be special before a single entree had even arrived at the table. For years, that positioning worked beautifully. Then came May 2024, and everything fell apart spectacularly. Red Lobster filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection and almost immediately announced the closure of 93 locations in one sweeping, devastating move. 93 restaurants, gone, just like that. But it was the financial details buried in the bankruptcy filings that truly stunned people. The company was carrying more than $1 billion in total liabilities, over $1 billion in accumulated debt for a seafood chain. So how does a nationally recognized brand with hundreds of locations, decades of built-in customer loyalty, and near-universal name recognition end up that catastrophically underwater? A surprisingly large part of the answer traces back to a single promotional offer that spiraled completely out of control: endless shrimp. On the surface, it seemed like a crowd-pleasing masterstroke. Customers absolutely loved the concept. Pay one set price and eat as much shrimp as your stomach can handle. The marketing practically wrote itself. But the underlying economics were an outright catastrophe. Diners routinely consumed $20 to $30 worth of shrimp while only paying $10 or $12 for the promotion. Every single refill deepened the losses. And here's the cruel irony: the more wildly popular the promotion became, the faster the company hemorrhaged cash. Success was literally destroying them. Stack that promotional disaster on top of unfavorable long-term supplier contracts, relentlessly rising food and labor costs, and a steady decline in regular foot traffic, and the outcome starts to feel inevitable rather than surprising. The bankruptcy filing reads less like a story of bad luck and more like a textbook case study in compounding strategic failures. One bad decision layered on top of another until the whole structure collapsed. There's also a health dimension that most people don't pause to consider. Many of Red Lobster's most popular shrimp and pasta combinations are swimming in sauces loaded with hidden sugars and stacked with excessive sodium. That special occasion dinner often comes with more consequences than the diner bargained for, both financially and physically. Red Lobster tried to position itself as affordable luxury dining. But when the luxury turns out to be unsustainable and the affordability turns out to be an illusion, the only possible destination is bankruptcy court. And the real tragedy is that thousands of hardworking employees, servers, cooks, managers who had devoted years of their careers to the company were the ones who bore the heaviest consequences of decisions they had no part in making. The executives who greenlit endless shrimp moved on. The workers who showed up every day to run those restaurants lost their livelihoods. 15. Cracker Barrel. A $700 million mistake and a logo that nearly killed the brand. Cracker Barrel isn't just a restaurant. It's a cultural institution. A piece of Americana wrapped in a building. The rocking chairs lined up across the front porch. The country store inside, packed with nostalgic trinkets and old-fashioned candy that you definitely don't need, but somehow always end up browsing for 20 minutes anyway. The heavy, stick-to-your-ribs breakfast plates loaded with biscuits and gravy, country ham, and eggs cooked every which way. For millions of Americans, Cracker Barrel is comfort food mixed with road trip memories, all bundled into a single reliable stop just off the highway. In 2024, corporate leadership decided it was time for an ambitious refresh. The company announced a roughly $700 million modernization initiative that included new restaurant locations, significant menu updates, and a comprehensive brand overhaul. The stated objective was bold and tricky: attract younger diners and new demographics, without alienating the fiercely loyal existing customer base that had been showing up faithfully for decades. Then, in August 2025, Cracker Barrel unveiled its new logo. And everything promptly went sideways. The longtime old-timer character, the bearded, folksy man who had been an integral part of the brand's visual identity for generations, was removed. The classic old country store wording vanished. What replaced it was a stripped-down, minimalist barrel icon, paired with a sleek, modern corporate-style font that looked like it belonged on a Silicon Valley tech startup's website, not on a roadside country restaurant. The public backlash was immediate, intense, and absolutely relentless. Longtime customers flooded every social media platform, accusing the company of abandoning its roots, erasing its heritage, and disrespecting the very identity that made people love the brand in the first place. Conservative commentators framed the rebrand as a deliberate attack on traditional American values. Even Donald Trump weighed in publicly, criticizing the logo change and amplifying the controversy to an even wider audience. Investors noticed. How could they not? The stock dropped between 7 and 11% in just a matter of days as the backlash intensified and showed no signs of fading. Less than 1 week after the new logo went public, Cracker Barrel slammed the brakes. The company scrapped the new design, reverted to the original logo, and issued a public statement about listening to our guests and learning from the response. 7 days. That's all it took for a $700 million modernization strategy to crash so hard that corporate leadership had to publicly admit they had fundamentally misread their own customer base. The lesson could not have been clearer or more expensive. You cannot modernize a brand by deleting the very things that people love about it. And when your core customers specifically choose your restaurants because walking through the door feels like stepping back into 1987, complete with rocking chairs, country music, and biscuit gravy, trying to make the brand look like a tech startup is, to put it mildly, a catastrophically bad idea. One last irony worth noting: those beloved country breakfasts often blow past daily recommended sodium and calorie limits before you've even finished your coffee and pulled out of the parking lot. Nostalgia tastes absolutely wonderful, right up until your doctor checks your blood pressure at your next annual physical. 16. Tijuana Flats, a regional wipeout nobody saw coming. Tijuana Flats was a regional Tex-Mex chain trying to survive in one of the most brutally competitive lanes in fast casual dining. Its positioning was intentionally different, edgier and more fun than Taco Bell, more affordable and accessible than Chipotle, and more playful and irreverent than your local independent taqueria. On paper, that sounded like a smart way to carve out a distinct niche. In practice, it left the brand with almost zero margin for error in any direction. That razor-thin margin disappeared entirely in April 2024. With very little public warning, Tijuana Flats shuttered 40 locations and filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection, listing approximately $19 million in outstanding debt. 40 restaurants vanished essentially overnight. Employees showed up for their scheduled shifts to find locked doors and dark windows. Regular customers drove to their usual location, only to find an empty building staring back at them. The collapse wasn't random or sudden. It traced directly back to a major strategic decision made in 2021 when the company rolled out an aggressive and ambitious menu expansion. New items, more complex menu builds requiring specialized preparation, additional equipment investments. It all looked exciting and forward-thinking on the surface, but each addition quietly made the business incrementally more expensive to operate. Labor requirements increased, food costs climbed, equipment spending piled up. As long as customer traffic held strong, those additional costs were absorbed, and the cracks stayed hidden. But the moment foot traffic softened, even slightly, the math fell apart completely. That ambitious menu overhaul had effectively turned every taco into a money-losing proposition, costing more to prepare and serve than the revenue it generated. Once profit margins flipped into negative territory, there was no realistic path back to profitability. Tijuana Flats found itself squeezed from every direction simultaneously. It couldn't compete with Taco Bell on price. Nobody can at that scale. It couldn't match local taquerias on freshness, authenticity, or genuine flavor. And for health-conscious diners, there was no clear reason to choose it. The menu leaned heavy, with items loaded with cheese, drenched in rich sauces, and sized to excess. This wasn't a gradual fade or a gentle decline. 40 restaurants disappeared almost instantaneously because a flashy menu expansion fundamentally wrecked the underlying economics of the entire operation. That's not a downturn. That's a wipeout. We're in the home stretch now, and these final stories are intense. If you've made it this far, you clearly care about understanding what's really happening in the restaurant industry. So do me a favor and hit that like button. It genuinely helps more people find this video. Share it with a friend who loves eating out, and make sure you're subscribed for what's coming next. 17. Buca di Beppo, when the party's over and the bills come due. Buca di Beppo was never a place that did anything subtly. It was loud, chaotic, gloriously over the top, and completely unapologetic about all of it. Italian-American food served family style on enormous platters that barely fit on the table. Walls covered floor to ceiling with kitschy, cluttered decor. Frank Sinatra or Dean Martin playing on a continuous loop in the background. The whole experience was designed for group celebrations, big birthday parties, team dinners, family reunions, nights that were supposed to be messy, memorable, and loud in the best possible way. Then came 2024, and the financial reality crashed through the door like an uninvited guest. Buca di Beppo filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and the numbers in the filing were genuinely painful to read. Nearly $39 million owed to the company's primary lender. More than $3 million in unpaid wages and employee benefits. Millions more in overdue utility bills and vendor invoices that had gone unpaid for months. Employees who had worked at the chain for years discovered they weren't being paid. Some locations had their utilities physically shut off because the bills hadn't been covered. Vendors and suppliers stopped making deliveries entirely because the company's checks kept bouncing. The brand that had built its entire identity around abundance and generosity became a cautionary tale of what happens when the dining rooms empty out, but the fixed costs don't follow. Why did it fail? Because oversized portions and a loud, fun atmosphere don't sustain a business when customers stop walking through the door. Families gradually realized they could get better Italian food at local neighborhood restaurants for less money and a more enjoyable experience. Younger groups, the 20-somethings and early 30-somethings, who represent the next generation of regular diners, gravitated toward cleaner, more modern, more photogenic dining spaces, not chaotic, cluttered, kitschy dining rooms that felt like a time capsule from 1998. And those massive family-style platters stopped feeling fun and festive once people started paying attention to their health and what they were actually consuming. Portion distortion at that scale creates genuine metabolic stress. And for anyone trying to manage their weight, their energy levels, or their overall well-being, the charm evaporated and was replaced by something that felt closer to a problem than a celebration. Buca di Beppo tried to survive on sheer volume and atmosphere alone. But when the atmosphere fades and the volume of customers can't keep pace with the volume of debt, bankruptcy isn't a surprise. It's the only possible outcome. The bigger picture, what all 17 of these stories really tell us. And here's the deeper, more important truth that all 17 of these chains collectively reveal when you step back and look at the full picture. None of them collapsed because of bad luck. Not a single one. They collapsed because of choices. Deliberate, repeated choices made by leadership teams who prioritized quarterly profits over the people actually eating the food. They chose convenience over quality. They chose short-term revenue gains over long-term customer trust. They chose automation over human connection. Prices climbed higher and higher without any corresponding improvement in the quality of what was being served. Portions shrank while price tags swelled. Oversized, oversalted, oversugared, nutritionally questionable meals kept getting pushed on menus while the brands behind them ran marketing campaigns pretending to care about wellness and healthy living. They chased trends instead of listening to the loyal customers who had built their businesses from the ground up over decades. And when the middle-class American family, the backbone of every single one of these brands, finally looked at the bill, looked at the food, and said, "We can't afford this anymore, and even if we could, it's not worth it," the entire system started to crack. From Starbucks and its $8 lattes, to Boston Market and its padlocked storefronts, to Red Lobster drowning under $1 billion in debt, to Cracker Barrel face-planting spectacularly over a logo redesign, the underlying message is identical. When you price out your most loyal customers, ignore their evolving health concerns, and offer them nothing they can't get cheaper, fresher, or better somewhere else, it doesn't matter how iconic your brand used to be. It doesn't matter how many locations you have. It doesn't matter how recognizable your logo is. You become irrelevant. and irrelevance in the restaurant business is a death sentence. What this means for you and your family right now, so here's what all of this means for you personally, especially if you're someone trying to feed a family, manage a household budget, and make healthier choices in 2026 without losing your mind in the process. First, stop feeling guilty about eating out less. You are not failing. These companies failed you. They took your loyalty for granted, raised their prices beyond what the food was worth, cut corners on quality, and then acted surprised when you stopped showing up. That's on them, not on you. Second, stop wondering why the affordable family dinner out seems to have disappeared. It didn't vanish by accident or because of some mysterious economic force. These chains actively destroyed it through their own decisions: shrinkflation, price hikes, quality reductions, and a relentless focus on extracting maximum revenue from every customer visit, regardless of whether the experience justified the cost. Third, stop going back to places that consistently let you down just because you used to love them. Nostalgia is a powerful emotion, but it's not worth your hard-earned money or your family's health. The restaurant you remember from 10 years ago and the restaurant that exists today are often two completely different things sharing the same name and logo. You have better options available to you right now than you've probably ever had before. Local, independently owned restaurants that use real, quality ingredients and actually care about the communities they serve. Cooking at home using fresh ingredients in ways that save significant money and leave you feeling energized instead of sluggish and regretful. Fast casual spots that have genuinely earned their reputation by actually delivering on the promises they make about quality, value, and transparency.